you have become like this mega brand. Like, at what point? Obviously, you were born Tim Ferriss, but at some point you decided to be Tim Ferriss. How did you become Tim Ferriss? Because this is, like, when you say Tim Ferriss, people know what that is. They're like, oh, Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Workweek. It's all very annoying. Like, I met you like 5 or 6 years ago. Nobody knew who you were. You're hanging out with Kevin Rose. And now
that's the secret right there.
Exactly. Hanging out with Kevin Rose. But now you're like this best-selling author. You're a household name. More, as much as a lot of the internet brands here. How did you become actually Tim Ferriss, the brand? When you look back on it, was it intentional?
I'll answer the last part first. So first, well, actually, I should thank you for inviting me on the show. Thank everybody for coming. It's really fun to be here. And you mentioned a couple of startups. I actually have quite a bit of background with Pivotal as well.
Oh, really?
So TaskRabbit. I was part of that entire sort of combination. And to answer the last part first, it wasn't intentional. In fact, I never had any plans to be a writer at all. And when I graduated from school, I don't know why my voice is cracking like Doogie Howser. We'll fix that in post. But I promised myself that I would never write anything longer than an email ever again because my thesis just about killed me. Clearly, that plan did not pan out for me. But I feel very certain, at least in my life, whenever I have a concrete 5 or 10 year plan, for that to be reliable, you have to aim well below your capacity and you cut off a lot of options. So it's really been sort of a 6 to 12 month serendipity. But the 4-Hour Workweek really opened the doors for me, opened all the doors. And that book, I think, took hold in part because it was one of the first books that focused on single author blogs primarily and blogs at large as a way of launching. And it's not because I had some amazing insight that nobody else had. In part, it was because my publisher would only let me touch stuff on the internet. And they wanted to control everything else. After being turned down 27 times, 29, I forget.
You got turned down 27 times to do the 4-Hour Workweek.
At least 27. It might have been more than that.
And what was the inspiration, though, for that book and for would you consider it like life hacking was something you were obsessed with? Or
I didn't.
Was it really around employment?
Well, I didn't think of it as life hacking. And I think, hacking, as useful as the term can be, is kind of overused to the point of being somewhat meaningless these days. But I always wanted to be a teacher, never wanted to be a writer. I always thought I would come back and teach maybe 9th or 10th grade at some point because I had inflection points in those years that I can attribute to very specific teachers. And if I'd gone the other direction, like a lot of my classmates who are now dead because they OD'd or whatever, I wanted to be in a position to make that kind of difference, but I never thought I would write as a way of teaching. The book was put together really as a collection of notes as I went about trying to repair my own life and reinvent my life and career. And
what was so broken in your life that you needed to fix it?
The wake-up call was in 2004 or so when a long-term girlfriend broke up with me and gave me a sort of parting plaque that said business hours end at 5 p.m. And I still have this thing. It has a collage of, like, my head is cut out as a photo. It's on this sort of like paper body with a business suit running with a briefcase and papers flying out of it. And she's like, keep this for your own personal well-being. Goodbye. And I was caught.
You got dumped.
I got dumped hard. And I was it caught me completely unaware, which is ridiculous because I was working from whatever it was, 7 or 8 in the morning till like 9 p.m. because I was chasing time zones. I never had more financial success at that point, and I had probably never been more unhappy either. So that was, I think, the wake-up call for me.
What were you doing at that time?
That was a sports nutrition supplement company that I built up after obsessing over that stuff and self-experimenting for years and years on sort of legal and illicit and everything in between substances. And
did you find a favorite?
Which category?
Both.
Let's see. Yeah, sure.
Or a friend who's not someone. What is the term? Swish. Someone who is not me. Swim. What's the term?
I don't know. I've never heard that.
On message boards, they put like someone who is not me.
Oh, of course.
And then they talk about like the most amazing.
Which by default means for me.
Which means
I would say. I feel like people either swing both on the performance, on the recreational side, certainly people tend to swing towards stimulants or depressants, and people are pretty easily split in either direction. I've never been a depressant guy, and I had athletes introduce me to ephedrine, caffeine, and aspirin, the ECA stack, which is extremely addictive, and that was my sort of performance drug of choice. It's highly addictive, and it took me more than a decade to get off of it. So I highly discourage you.
What is this exactly? You take an aspirin?
You combine ephedrine, caffeine, and aspirin in a particular ratio that basically gives you a synergistic, in the most literal sense, effect, whereby you're sort of combining 1 + 1 + 1 to equal like 20 biochemically, and it's very strong. On the illicit side, and I don't know if I'd call this recreational, but I'm a big fan of psilocybin mushrooms. I think they're very underutilized for therapeutic purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and by the way, all the tea you've been drinking, we took the liberty of putting mushrooms in those.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great second half of the show.
About 5 of you got ayahuasca, so we'll know who you are pretty quickly.
Yeah, that'll be the naked person running up and down the middle of the...
Yeah, right.
So what is it about...
But the branding stuff, I've never really directly thought about building a personal brand, and that may be surprising for some people to hear, but I've thought about diversifying my identity at different points. So there was a point where I realized I didn't want to be the 4-hour workweek guy forever, and made the deliberate choice to run the risk of not doing 4-hour workweek 2, the 3-hour workweek, and selling it for a fortune to publishers, which I could have done, and doing the 4-hour body very deliberately, so that I would have sort of 2 worlds to sit in if the 4-hour body were successful. And then there came a point where I said, you know what, I don't want to be the how-to author indefinitely. Why don't I diversify my identity with angel investing, which started in 2007? And so I've made those choices along the lines so that my self-worth and perception of myself is not tied up in one basket. Much like an investment portfolio, I don't want to run the risk of becoming depressed if one area of my life collapses.